So I'm going to tell you three things. One is why we're here tonight, why I'm here, and why David is here. So there was this funny thing that happened last year called an election, and afterward it gave license to people to treat others in, I would say, discriminatory ways. And so I don't know how your Thanksgiving went, but my Thanksgiving was not all that pleasant, because people around the table were making comments, and I was trying to figure out, so how do I counteract it? How do I balance it? How do I, give pause to the credibility, at least that was growing around the table? And it was tough. It was awkward. You can ask some questions. You can say I don't agree, but I wanted more strategy. I wanted more technique. So that's kind of how, from my perspective, how we've gotten here. The reason why this church was selected is we went to a variety of churches around town. Other groups like the ACLU, CLU said, hey, is this something you want to be a part of? We think it'll be really of value for people to have tools and skills and techniques to be able to utilize in their daily lives. And thankfully, Stephanie responded right away and said, yes, absolutely, we want to be a part of this, because you're doing this work already. So this is just to augment what is already going on in this church and to bring in a few other people from the community. I work in community organizing here in Pasadena. I work for a group called Collaborate Pasadena. I also do work currently for the Altadena Library. So this type of an activity is really, really important to me, because it helps train others in I would say, in a new methodology for thinking about these problems. So, David is extraordinary and exceptional, and you'll find that out in a few minutes. And he worked here for many years at the Western Justice Center, which is just 2 or 3 blocks away, which you actually look at. So, it was wonderful to be able to give him the opportunity to come back. He also is utilizing some technological advances that I think are unique and create more synergy, more active participation in the room. And there are a few of these flyers. We'll be doing a free workshop on Friday if you want to learn more about what he's about to do. But he's Princeton trained, PhD. He has a best-selling, best-written book on civic engagement. He works for national entities that were doing listening projects. We're just really, really grateful to have him here today, flying out from North Carolina to be with us. So please welcome me, David.
All right. Well, you put it back there. I'm mic'd up. Thank y'all so much. I appreciate y'all coming out tonight. It's great to be back in Pasadena. I lived here for a few years, and it warms my heart to be back and to be with people who care about improving the world. So what we want to do tonight is we want to be in a couple different modes. Some of what we're going to do is I'm going to deliver information to you. That's a kind of a download of information, and I hope that you benefit from that, the techniques, the skills, etc. That's part of the goal of tonight. Part of the goal of tonight is also for me to get some feedback from you. I'm working on this project which I don't know what to call it. I don't know if it's called White Ally 4.0 or whether it's called Woke Like Me or whether it's called White and Woke. I'm still trying to figure out what to call it, but it's really about empowering people like y'all, white allies, to do a better job at advancing the cause of racial justice. So I'm going to share some ideas with you and some tools and techniques, and I want your feedback. That's part of it. And also, I'm hoping that we can have a little sharing, a little crosstalk, so we can learn from each other. And so y'all can learn from each other, and I can learn from that process. So we're going to be in all of those modes this evening. That's overall goal. Okay. From an agenda standpoint, we've seen, this is welcome introductions. I'm going to say a little bit about the importance of and dilemmas for white allies. I think one of the things that I want to encourage are people who are doing that great work that y'all are doing of trying to be white allies for racial justice, being a little more reflective about what you're doing and what you're not doing, how you're spending your energy, how you're not spending your energy, which is to say, that is critiquing it. It's just to say we can all benefit from looking with more discernment at what we're doing and what we're not doing. I'm to say a little bit about why I think that the work of persuading people who we might call racism deniers, I tend to call them racism skeptics because I'm searching for language that they would consider neutral, but is also true. The question is, do we need to shift the burden of that work of persuading them away from people of color and to folks like y'all? I think that that's true, and we need to talk about that. Most importantly, we need to talk about, if we were to do that, what do we do? How should that actually happen? What are the strategies that white allies need to use to try to connect with skeptics and try to expand the conversation, try to expand how they are looking at things? So we'll spend some time on those strategies. That's our overall flow of the next couple of hours. Now, one of the ways we're going to find out who's here is to use this technology at the table that Brian mentioned. I have written a book about using this technology. Oh yeah, there you go, swing it around. That's beautiful. These are called audience polling devices or clickers. In my book, I call them speak devices for speed polling to enhance input and knowledge. And the idea is we can all benefit from seeing all of our perspectives. So we're going to use these devices several times during our time together. First, we'll just find out we're using to find out who's here. They're pretty straightforward. I'm going to ask a question, and you will press the button that corresponds to your answer. Sometimes there'll be multiple choice, and you can press more than one, but most of the time there'll be just one answer. If you make a mistake, just press it again. It records the last one. One friend of mine said it's you can vote as often as you want, but we're not in Chicago, so only your last vote counts. Okay? So if you make a mistake, just do it over. Okay? And we're going to get them all back at the end because they're not going to help your DVR or your garage door or anything like that, right? Pretty straightforward. Okay. First question is a warm-up question. Do you have any tattoos? If your answer is no, you do not put bumper stickers on a Bentley. That's what a famous beauty philosopher said. Press 1. If your answer is no, but you've considered it, press 2. If your answer is yes, but only those close to you can see it, press 3. If your answer is yes, and it's visible to most folks, press 4. And if your answer is have you seen my sleeve, press 5. If you don't know what a sleeve is, do not press 5. Boom, boom. All right, let's see what we got here. Oh, look at y'all. Almost more than half are like no, including 22% with no you considered. But a big portion, this is my biggest portion ever of people who had tattoos. Very nice. By the way, the famous beauty philosopher was Kim Kardashian. And you cannot change your vote because you're agreeing with Kim Kardashian. But you see the idea. Ask a question, you vote, we see the answer pretty quickly. Okay? All right. How many times have you traveled around the sun? If it's 29 or fewer, press 1. If you forgot your 5th grade astronomy, that means how old are you? One time around the sun is a year. 30 to 44, press 2. 45 to 55, press 3. 56 or more, press 4. All right. Okay, so we have a big diversity of age. That's really important. Part of what we have to recognize is that the struggle for racial equality, racial equity, racial reconciliation, racial justice, it shifts over time, and our tactics might need to shift. So it's really useful to have people from a variety of age groups in the room. Which of these best describes your gender? 1, female, 2, female, 3, gender nonconforming. All right, so girls rock, look at that. Not surprising that females dominate on that. Okay. Where does your work on racial equity, reconciliation, justice fit into the many things that you do? Again, there is no criticism here. But would you say it's a primary use of your life energy? It's one of the main things that you do. Or the first one is, it's my primary use of my life energy. It's one of the main things you do, number two. It's one of my several interests. For as you care about it, but it's not become my primary focus. Okay, so we got the few of us, it's the main thing we do. A big portion, it's one of the main things we do. And a little more than 50%, it's either one of my several interests or you care about, it's not a primary focus. And that's, I want to again make sure that y'all understand, that is okay.
Descriptive.
It's descriptive. I am not coming at you with the idea that this needs to be the main thing that you're doing. I think that the work of the racial justice equity movement needs to get more people who would come to a meeting, and even if they're answering number 4, that's a whole lot better than people who wouldn't come to a meeting, right? But it is important that we look at where we are in this and how much we're doing, and as we'll talk about, what you're actually spending your time on. What portion of your people in your circle, of your closest 30 people, will be called racism skeptics? What the closest 30 people, what number of those people would you say are racism skeptics? Would it be none or almost none? You're deep in the bubble, you're deep in the liberal bubble, right? Would it be a few, less than 7, plus 2, some, 7 to 15, or most, more than 15? Look at y'all, a third of us are deep in the bubble, right? That's important for us to know, right? So first of all, I'm glad y'all came, and we're still doing the same content, and it is still my belief that even if most of the people, or all of the people in your circle look at things like you, there is still important work for you to do in terms of understanding racism better, understanding strategies about it better, understanding strategies of how to communicate about it better. That is still important to do. And I would like us to notice that the majority of us have people in our circle who are skeptics. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, how much energy are we spending trying to reach those people, and how are we spending it? What are our strategies for spending it? Are we using the best ways of doing that? Okay, this is the actual fact question. What portion of white people nationally think that racism against whites is as big of a problem as against people of color? So it's not just Pasadena, y'all. Not just your friends, not just Pasadena, nationally. What's your best estimate of that? Wow, you guys are awesome. That is exactly correct. That is exactly correct. Half of the white folks in this country think that racism against white people is just as big of a problem as racism against people of color. Now, one of the things that means is that if you have a more extended definition of white allies, half of the folks are white allies. Like half of the folk get it, right? So the question we have to ask ourselves is, are we equipping those folks sufficiently to do the persuasive work to the other half? I suggest that we're not necessarily doing that, and we need to think in a more discerning way about how we do that. Okay, compared to other white allies you know, how effective are you in doing, forgive that misprint, in doing the hard work of getting skeptics to take racism seriously? Now, yes, we are trying to combat hierarchies, but I'm just asking, how effective do you think you are compared to other white allies that you know in doing this important task? Are you better than average, slightly more effective than average, about average, slightly less effective than average, or less effective than average? What is your assessment of how you compare to other white allies you know in doing that? Okay, y'all got your votes in. Okay. So, well, look at that. The biggest portion, 35%, are about average. Wow. And almost half of us think we're better than average. Half of us. That's interesting. So it's actually a little more think we're slightly less effective than average. And that might be because we don't know, but we look at our own effectiveness and we don't necessarily see as much of it as we would like. But that's useful to note. I think that ultimately, one of the things that I want to encourage white allies to do is to really get in more frequent and higher quality discussions with other white allies about what you're doing and how. What worked? What did we try? How did that work? Should we try something different? That is part of what I think the work of being a white ally needs to involve. You can put the clickers down for a while. Okay, I'm going to say a little bit about why I think white allies are critical right now. As we can see from not only the recent national election, but Brexit, the upcoming election in France, white-dominated countries are going through an identity crisis. They are trying to figure out who we are and who we want to be, and what is the role of our traditional notions of white, Frenchness, Englandish, whatever, Germany. What is that? Right? To what extent can we actually accommodate these brown folks and still be German, still be French, still be English? Now this debate about who gets to be an American, we've been dealing with this for a long time because we have the blessing of being in a country that doesn't have the same type of thousands of year history, thousands of year ethnic history. We're a nation of people who weren't here from the beginning. So we've always been wrestling with the question of who it really gets to be an American. So what what is happening now is that while we've made a lot of progress on that over the centuries, right, and we know that history, we're revisiting that question just like people around the world are, other white countries are, but it's more poignant for us because of our long history of migration, immigration, and how we have tended to want to expand that definition of who gets to be considered valid. So part of what we're wrestling with is, in light of that history, how do we think about what racism is in that and what it has been, and what do we do with that now? We're revisiting that question. A fair amount of folk, we can name people in Trump's administration, we can name people like Stephen King, the congressman from Ohio. They have a more limited vision of a different vision than I have, different people in this room, different than people in this room have, about how we should look at Americanness and who gets to be an American, and how we should look at the way that racism has played a role in that definition over time. So part of what I think is going on now is that we're collectively revisiting this issue. How are we going to interpret this racial history? And what do we do with that in terms of making, how aggressively we try to expand who gets to be considered a valid American and who doesn't? It is my belief that folks like y'all, white allies, are critical in that reexamination. That is less effective as a conversation between white folk and people of color. That needs to be part of it, but that I would submit that might not even need to be the main part of that conversation. The main part of the conversation needs to be a conversation among white people. But it needs to be a conversation that happens effectively. Now, it needs to happen on the radio. It needs to happen on television. Perhaps most importantly, it needs to happen in living rooms, when people are out for coffee, when people are watching the game, when people are having the kind of one-on-one conversations that really drive our thinking. Yes, that stuff on TV and in the radio is fine, but we shouldn't leave it to those experts to have that. So then the question becomes, in light of the dilemmas facing the world about whether we're going to close our borders, reject globalization, decide France first, England first, America first. This is a global crisis. Y'all's role is critical in that global dilemma. So it's bigger than it's bigger than like we need to have some more racial equity and justice. It is actually a global dilemma that the West, historically the white countries, has about its future. And so I would just invite you to look at your passion, your work, your endeavors in being a white ally in a broader context. We need y'all, the world needs y'all to be more effective in reaching people who have a tendency to deny the racial history we have. The world needs y'all to be more effective in that. Now, there's a dilemma. There's several dilemmas, and one of the dilemmas is there's a call to resist right now. Thank God, right? I was on the mall doing a listening project on the day of the march and on the day of the inauguration. I was down there mobilizing white folk to listen to the people who came to first inauguration and then the protest march, to try to understand what are people thinking, what visions of America do they have, how do they conceptualize the other side. The people who came to that march, and we can see that from the last 100 days, they want to fight, they want to win, they want to try to take America back in a certain way. That is important to do. We have to ask ourselves the question, how much energy do we put on that task, a vital task with the level of retrenchment that we are seeing from the current regime, and how much energy do we put on something else, and that is trying to persuade people that we need to look at things differently. Those are different tasks. Winning political victories is a different way of using your energy. It's a different, it calls on different skills than trying to persuade people. Maybe it isn't vital that you spend your time talking to your cousin Dylan or your uncle Skylar, to use really white names. Maybe that is less important than you going to the rallies or you going to the marches. But that's a dilemma that I would invite y'all to actually look at in the face and confront. Now, can you do both? Sure. We'll have limited energy. We have to make decisions. But I guess I just want to acknowledge that given the political environment, given the very long task of trying to rectify the racial inequities and the inequities in general, there's more to be done than we all can do. These problems might outlast us, but we still need to be smart about where we spend our energy and time. This is a real dilemma. I personally believe, as I will continue to say, that we're a little bit too skewed away from that hard work, that hard one-on-one work. So my project is all about that particular task. Okay. I'm going to give y'all a brief self-assessment tool. We're going to do a longer one in the same domain in a little while. Does anybody, who doesn't have a writing implement? Would you be so great if you could pass those out? Well, let me have one of them.
You don't have it memorized?
I do not have it memorized, exactly. So while he's handing them out, so here's what this is. on this sheet, 3 times, I've listed 9, what I think of as 9 domains of white ally work. They all are important. They all are important. And I'm gonna ask y'all to make some prioritization. Here's how it goes. There's 9 of them. What I want you to do is next to the top 3, okay, I want you to do 3 different experiments. One is, you think of yourself as the ideal white ally you want to be. What's most important? Put an H by the 3 most important. And what's medium important? Put an M, 3 H's and 2 M's. In your ideal self as a white ally. Then I want you to go back and look at, what are you actually doing? That's the second one. Question 2 is, if you look at the same list and look at not what your ideal should be, but what are you actually spending your time and energy on? That's the second one. Same list. The top 3 get an H, second 2 get an M. And then on the back, now I want you to think about like the white ally community as far as you know it. What should be most important to focus on? Top 3 get an H, second 2 get an M. The other questions should be pretty straightforward. There's no right or wrong answers. Just fill it out, kind of top of mind, be thoughtful, but quick so we can move forward. Okay, so we're going to, while the people who are still continue to do that, I want to get sort of people's reaction to doing this. Like I would imagine it's difficult, but people's reaction to doing this, to just the exercise itself, like to, again, thinking of those 3 levels. What came up for you as you tried to do it?
Yeah. Stephanie said, I'm pretty good at this kind of stuff. And I thought, am I? It really made me go internally and really reconsider.
It made you more doubtful.
It made me more doubtful.
Why? Say, why did it do that?
Why did it do
Or how did it do it?
How did it do it? It asked for hierarchies and the idea of choosing something that was more important than something else. Trying to think of it being strategic and very pragmatic, and I want to do things that make a difference, right? And so, gosh, am I doing what's making a difference? And I have a few friends here, but I didn't bring people that weren't already coming. Mm-hmm. And that bothers me.
Gotcha. Okay. Other folks?
I didn't understand what the first choice on the first 3 questions, the efforts to build outposts of the beloved community with people of color.
So that's
very intriguing, but I really didn't.
What the heck is that?
So,
okay.
I didn't know what to do with that.
Okay. Paige, do you have any examples of that? Like I give examples, but Paige is somebody I've known for 30 years. We went to grad school together. She's a minister down in Irvine. So do you, now what, I have some examples, but did that resonate for you as a thing that people?
Right, because it sounded really, it's.
There's a lot of chord. I thought that was easy, my bad.
Right, I was thinking of really intense kinds of community situations, like the Koinonia Farms in South Georgia that Clarence Jordan set up, right, very intentionally in South Georgia to be a beacon of anti-racism efforts, like in the 50s. And then I was thinking of the co-housing unit that the church I was in North Oakland set up. Not necessarily, they tried to be inclusive and Christian and intentional. I don't know if it was specifically about race, but those I was thinking about really intense, difficult efforts.
Wow, okay. This just shows I need to rephrase that question. Why don't you hand the mic to that sister right there? Because here's what I meant. If you gather a black and white choirs to every quarter go to different churches, you are building the outpost of the beloved community by having that and have people come to that. So all the way to what you described, but I'm just saying that the point of that question, which I clearly need to rephrase, there's a much lower threshold to that. Like if you were just creating those little moments of the beloved community on purpose, which are intentionally positioned as that, that's what that meant. So that's
moments.
Moments. There you go. That's really helpful. Again, I'm getting feedback on my instrument. My purpose, one of my purposes is to help white allies become more reflective and look at themselves, and I need to phrase things in ways that make sense. What was your reaction to doing this?
Well, I was going to lower the bar because the examples you gave felt very like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get there.
No, I know, I didn't.
So, the example that came to me, just as an illustration, and maybe you can let me know if this is sort of along the same line. Like our group, the White Ally group, we sort of have an accountability group, but I don't actually see them except for at actions. So when I reached out and said, could we hang out? Like to me, that felt like I need to be in a relationship with this person. I need to not just see her and her
at the rally.
At the rally.
Right.
I really know who she is and have a friendship with her.
Exactly. That's exactly what that's intended to convey. Like the beloved community might have actions within it, spring off of it, that are about social change, but it's a community, right? So yes, that's exactly what I was intending to convey, and it looks like I need to work on the phrasing of that. Anybody else have any reactions, positive or negative? I'm really interested in your authentic responses to doing that. And also looking at, again, the contrast between, if there was one, between what you think you should be doing and what you're actually doing. Thank you so much.
So, number 5 about conversations with undecided or Trump supporters. I was wondering if you count Facebook discussions as conversations. Because that number is really different.
Well, do you, okay, so.
Like in person versus Facebook, and I'm wondering.
What have you found to be the effectiveness of those kind of Facebook exchanges as a general?
I don't know. You can't see someone's face when you post an article or reply. Like they might just be like, or they might be like, oh, that's a really interesting point.
So okay, so let me get this straight. Let me go the positive part of that. You have found that sometimes in these Facebook exchanges, people who would be considered racism skeptics go, oh, I never thought about it like that. You've seen.
No, I have not seen that. But they might silently be doing it to themselves. But I fear.
Yes, they might do that. Yes. I saw a unicorn just this morning, actually.
I have had that experience. I got a Donald Trump supporter to promise she was going to read Howard Zinn's History of the United States. And it was like a 2 or 3 day conversation that went on with her and her husband and another guy. And I just kept kind of massaging it to get to what the core of their hatred and anger was. And she turned. I don't know.
Wow.
About the
Wow, we can all clap for that. In fact, we're going to come back to that. That's really great to hear that. And this happened online. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
That's fabulous. Anybody else have any other reactions or insights from that instrument?
From Facebook or social media?
No, well, we can talk about Facebook. I'm just saying that you can pick up that thread too.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just, that was just a clarifying question. I think I was going to say earlier, that adults are so proud. Kids maybe too, but adults hate to indicate that they might have been wrong. So I never look for people to go, oh, I never thought of it that way. Like when I get stony-faced silence, that's usually I think that's the best chance that I might have gotten the gears turning. I can kind of sense when the gears are turning. But,
Okay.
People vote things. This lady, she's from a really cloistered Orthodox Jewish community, and I just once had a conversation with her. It was horrifying how little she understood about the world. But she's like 20 now or something, and she posted a thing, white people didn't invent slavery, they ended slavery. And I said, okay, no, excuse me. A tiny minority dragged them kicking and screaming into ending it. A tiny minority dragged them kicking and screaming into ending Jim Crow. And I went down the thing, and nobody responded. And I was thinking, well, maybe the wheels are turning. Because if I hadn't got the wheels turning, somebody would have come back with me with more resistance. And I don't know.
Or you don't know. So first of all, it's great that you did that. And you don't know whether they just dismissed you. Right? It could have been that the wheels are turning. I mean, or do you have was there any other subsequent evidence that would suggest that the wheels are turning? I hope that happened.
Yeah, I never really know when the wheels are turning.
Right.
Because people are so stonewally.
Got you. last comment, and then we're going to move on to the next thing.
Just confirmation about number 2 regarding working for institutional change. Would that include things like public policy advocacy around like not letting the LA County Jail expand? Like,
that's institutional change. I mean, you could, yes, that would be called, if that is done for the purposes of racial equity, then that's working for institutional change.
Okay. That's what I thought, but I wanted to.
I got you. So please collect the forms that you already did, put them in a stack on the table. Okay. So here's what we're about to do. We're going to pass out a different instrument, which pushes this further. And basically, it tries to encourage you to look at like the different elements of those 9 categories, right? To see what you, like, because there's what we think we do, and then if we get more details, maybe what we actually do. So again, some of these things will be familiar to you. Oh, by the way, I hope everybody put that last thing with their street and their, okay, all right. So again, now the reason we're doing this is because I need this information to help me refine this instrument, but our goal is to give it back to you, right? So that's why we're asking for you to put your identifying information on there, so before the end of the evening we can give it back to you. Okay? So you can do some more reflection. You can use this for your own reflection if you want to. So again, there's a balance between being super thoughtful and being super quick. Lean towards being somewhat quick. Okay, so if everybody close to collecting, okay, so here's what's going to happen. What we worked out with Stephanie is that the dilemma was, how do I get this information and still make it useful to you? It's designed to be a reflective, useful tool. So the reason we're collecting them and have her copy and get them back is so that you can have that and I can have it too, right? That's the reason we're doing that. So right now is the time where I might have to hear that my tools suck in some way or another. That they suck because they're unclear, that they suck because they're disempowering, or that y'all might say they're fantastic or something in between. So I just really want to give room for folks to reflect on those 2 questions. Is doing one or both of the tools, or actually useful and or empowering? And it could be possible that one of them's useful, one's not, one of them's empowering and one's not. My goal in this is to try to be of service to y'all's great work that I so respect and admire of being white allies, but if the tool doesn't really help or empower, or it just irritates you, I need to know that. Let me get you, where's that microphone? Okay, there you go.
The last survey we just did was very useful for me. At one point I realized when you were asking about online presence, I had never thought of this before. So if someone in my circle has been extremely irritating or annoying around racism, I block them or just not follow them or something. Because I don't want to hear it, I don't want to see it. You know? And it just made me realize that I shouldn't be doing that. That maybe my best use of my time online occasionally is to maybe gently engage them in ways that, or not gently engage them in ways that might be more useful to anti-racism causes or something.
Gotcha.
I hadn't thought about that before.
Okay.
So that was useful.
That's useful. Okay. And again, everybody, we're not looking for consensus, we're looking for your actual opinion about the level of utility and or empowerment or accuracy of either of those instruments. The first one that was more, if not surface, more categorical, and the second one was more detailed.
So for the second one, I don't know if it was intentional, but I thought it was useful that it seemed like chronological to me, like at least from my personal experience, like this first page, just the order of how I've been doing things. Like when you get to like the pages with like movement building and whatnot, it made me reflect on like that I haven't done enough of that, and it's because I think I'm still in the development stage.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
I thought that, I don't know if that was intentional, but it was useful for me to think about like what I could do in the future.
Got you. Okay. Thank you for that.
At least for me, with the different surveys so far, is the strength of them they're helpful in me being self-descriptive. So what is it I'm doing and laying it out. It doesn't go the next stage of, and maybe that's another piece, is of the ought. So it tells me what I'm doing, but doesn't help me evaluate which one to cut or which one to increase in a way that's clear enough that I would adjust.
Got you.
Yeah, I can be like uneasy and go.
Like you said, like I'm not trying to disempower anybody. That's interesting.
Right. So you're like, I'm not sure, should I adjust this one, but I'm not sure. And the tool itself doesn't help me
sort that out.
Sort that out.
Got you. Okay.
And I would disagree with that, because I thought the first tool, while in the immediate moment felt kind of, I don't know if disempowering is the right word, it was definitely uncomfortable, because it caused me to compare how I could be best using my time with how I actually am using my time, which told me how I should be using my time.
Got you. Okay.
All the pages were good to me, good for me. They affirmed what I kind of already knew about myself, and that's that I'm around people who I know think totally different than I am, and so we just don't get into it.
We ain't trying to go there.
We don't go there, and the excuse that I use is because we're here to do such and such, and sometimes I'll walk into a room where people have already gathered, and the conversation stops because
there she goes.
because I'm entering the room.
That's interesting.
And I guess part of me knows that their opinions are not going to change me, and so I'm not sure that getting into it with my opinions is going to change them. So that's kind of a cop-out. So this was good for me, and I belong to groups, but we are working with so many issues that do involve racism, but it's like affordable housing and immigration rights and dialogue with groups that are trying to get groups to get along. So, but it's not specifically about racism, but that is part of it. So
did the whole construction of white ally and proportion of work, are you telling me that didn't work because the nature of the way you deal with these issues is the race work is infused with other causes, or do the constructs basically still work or not?
Well, the concept still works because I realize that what I do is infused in the other things, but I probably need to be braver. Like my internet activity, I don't get things from people that
I'm in that bubble too.
Because I discard that stuff.
Just like she was saying.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, so.
Thank you so much. So y'all need to know that the reason that we have this extra cord is so we can include you. So I'm not saying there's pressure to make a comment, but I am saying that the reason that we got the extra cord is because of y'all. Oh, look at that, very good.
I can say something. I think that one result for me anyway, and I also live in the bubble, so I have very little encounter with like explicit racism, sometimes implicit, but in my immediate circle and on Facebook, I've also like blocked everyone who's somewhat questionable. But
you are obviously not alone, right? That is something that happens.
But as far as the kind of the distinction between what we should be doing and what we are doing, I mean, there's a sort of strategic and tactical question too, or just, I guess, in terms of like what kind of situations you tend to find yourself in. So, like interacting with students, for example, which is one of the ways that it turns out that one of my own priorities is like not communicating my white privilege to students of color. I find that, that's because of like my job or whatever, that's something, or jobs that I've had, that's something that I've had to do, whereas I don't necessarily think that that's more important than other things. Do you know what I mean?
So are you saying, okay, got you. They're all important, that's part of the dilemma. So are you saying that the hierarchy of,
I'm saying that,
from the first one of which is more important, is doesn't work because of that?
No. I'm just saying that the way that the tool is designed, when I reflect on my own activities, I'm thinking about like the situations that I tend to find myself in, as opposed to the things that I think in absolute terms are the highest priorities.
Ah, gotcha. You did a great job of representing the table, by the way. Anybody else, lady, want to add anything to this? Well, I really appreciate y'all taking the time to do that. I feel like I need to make a comment, my reaction to this whole online thing. And let me be clear, I have not done extensive thinking about this, but I'm an excessive Facebook user. And I find that the nature of exchanges online, the nature of it is almost antithetical to the kind of perspective expansion that is needed. I will come back to this issue. I fundamentally think that the way to move people forward is to have people exchange experiences, not just perspectives. And Facebook, while in theory could be a means by which people exchange experiences, that is not what typically happens. People are working too quickly, there's too little trust, you don't have that sort of humanizing pressure of somebody's eye right on you you're looking at. So people stay too often in the perspective mode, and then they're just sort of snarkily battering back perspective.
Yeah, in the church I say that opinions are cheap and listening is expensive.
Boom.
So
I will steal that, brother. Keep going.
It's hard for me to find folks who will listen for more than 60 seconds. But I fall over people a number of times a day who are willing to offer me their opinions on stuff. But I can't run a railroad with opinions.
Right.
What I can do is build a community with people who listen to each other, but not with opinions.
Go on, right on.
Yeah, one of the things, I like what you just said about experiences, share your experiences rather than your perspectives. I grew up in Montana. All right, I live in Pasadena. I lived in New York for 25 years. So I've got this very diverse group of people in thought and every kind of diversity you can imagine. And I purposely don't block my more conservative friends. They more often than not just ignore me or move on or block me. I've been blocked by many
right.
people, like, oh, and then I was their friend, whatever. And that's fine, but I won't block them because I personally, and I do talk about my experience, and I reach out to them as our friendship from when I knew them. Oh, hey, Doug, great to see your family, blah, blah. By the way, I noticed you posted this. Have you ever thought of what? And I start to engage in a conversation as like a text messaging, like we're communicating rather than a bleh, right? And I think Facebook, I've also done that on Facebook. I'm not saying I don't. I've also done bleh, but the other one is so much more effective. And it's so much more effective when you communicate with somebody and not make them completely wrong, even though I think that they actually are. I actually don't think that just because you're sharing, like you said, sharing your experience, I think that we need to be brave and share and stop blocking all those people because they're the ones that need to hear us.
Right on, right on. I'm gonna get you are that's a fantastic precursor to what I'm talking about. That's fantastic. Okay, so I want to say a little bit about why I think we need to shift the burden of persuasion of skeptics to people like y'all white allies and away from people like me. There's several reasons. This country right now is about 33% people of color. So, first of all, most people overestimate it. You know, huge portion of people estimate it's like half people of color. It's not, it's a third, right? And a bunch of those people are children. So if we are trying to, within a 20-year time horizon, move the needle on the number of white people who think racism against people of color is worse than against white people, and we, again against people of color, right? If we're trying to move the needle on that portion, and we're moving that dependent upon people having like one-on-one dialogic encounters with people of color, we won't have to, people don't need to be paid for that because we will spend all our time talking to white people, right? There's not that many of us compared to the number of white people. So that is not a strategy for moving that forward simply because of the numbers involved. But that's not the only reason. Has anybody here not heard of white fragility? So just to review, so y'all know it, white fragility basically, to summarize it, is the phenomenon of white people having kind of excessive responses shutting down to when notions of racism are raised. Feeling accused, feeling super sad, feeling really angry, feeling really frustrated, and essentially disengaging either physically or emotionally or cognitively from the conversation. Now, this often comes up in racial dialogues, often comes up when people are just talking about race in other settings. Now, I take white fragility very seriously. White fragility can exist with other white people, but it is much more activated with people of color. There's something also from the social science world called racial anxiety. Racial anxiety is that feeling of discomfort that is almost inherent in cross-racial interactions. For people of color, racial anxiety takes a form of feeling that I will be judged as less than. We've been dealing with that for 400 years. For white people since the 60s, racial anxiety means feeling like they're going to judge me as a racist. Now, interestingly, the behavioral characteristics of racial anxiety, you don't talk as long, you don't look at the person, you don't laugh as much, you fidget, are the exact same characteristics from people having bias. So it looks just the same. So you can see how that could be an escalating thing, right? We're having an encounter, you're not necessarily biased towards me, but you think that I'm going to think that. You act the exact same way that you would if you were biased towards me. I think that, oh, that person got a problem with black people, and here we go, right? So racial anxiety enhances, to a significant extent, white fragility. It's not the only factor, but it enhances it. One reason for shifting the burden of trying to reach skeptics is because white fragility is much less of an issue. I'm not saying it's zero, it's much, much less. People of color are tired of doing this work. Now, I'm sure that y'all have been in meetings, you've been in meetings where with people of color who are trying to fight racism, they will tell you, we are tired of doing that work. So, and I've heard this for a long time, but increasingly in the past couple decades, right? So we're tired of doing it, and we don't even necessarily bring the best energy to doing it because we're tired of doing it, right? There's a whole feeling amongst a lot of people of color, especially activists, that y'all need to go do that work. We are tired of doing it. And even people who are not activists are tired of doing it. I have other things to do than educate white people, right? Susie needs to get her own education somewhere else, right? So that's another reason why we need to shift the burden somewhere else. Now, given the level of fatigue and even irritation that people of color have for this, our methods of trying to persuade people are often not effective. We're often trying to slam people with the truth about 400 years of oppression. You idiot, how come you don't see it? I shouldn't even have to have a conversation with you, right? That is not necessarily the way to move people forward, right? So not only are we tired of doing it, but when we try to do that, we're often not bringing good methods of engagement to doing that. That's another reason why we should not be doing that. Y'all should be doing this. Now, I just gave you 5 different arguments for why you need to shift the work. Pick up your clicker. I just gave you 5 different arguments. It is helpful for me to think about which 2 arguments do you think that most people will find most compelling?
Most people, not that I find.
Right. Well, I'm going to ask you what you find most compelling in a minute. I'm asking you right now to think about the white allies you know. Which of those arguments do you think, we vote for 2 of them, do most white allies, not the 50% white allies, but the more narrow definition, the people who like sometimes come to meetings like this. Which of those 2 arguments are most compelling?
Could you sit into in succession?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you what you think is most compelling in a minute. All right, we're going to move forward. Okay, interesting, a big one on allies don't activate white fragility nearly as much. Okay, now I'm going to ask you your own personal opinion, separate from how well or poorly I might have articulated those ideas, but just the ideas themselves. Which 2 of these ideas do you personally find most compelling as the reasons we need to shift the focus of the work? People of color tired of doing it. Got you. Okay, interesting. So that's really great that y'all recognize that. This is useful for me to see if there's any lack of alignment. I appreciate that. Okay. What I want to do next is to let me make sure we get to this. I want us to tap into our experiences that tell us something about what works and doesn't work. I am going to lay out my ideas before we leave in a half hour. But I also think that there's genius in the group. So I'm a big believer in collective processes which try to tap the genius that might be present. Thank you so much, Brian. So basically, this asks you to do 2 things. Think of an experience where you or someone you observed attempted to broaden a skeptic's understanding of racism, and they made notable progress. This might have happened over a period of time. What lessons could be gleaned about what tactics sometimes work? That's the top. And at the bottom is, think of an experience in which someone you observed attempted to broaden a skeptic's understanding and did not make progress or perhaps even cause retrenchment. Just jot a couple things down about what happened. But the biggest thing is the lessons that we can glean from that. As part of my project, I'm trying to gather stories from white allies. If you feel like, if you're open to me contacting you to follow up on the story, either of the stories, put your email or text number at the bottom. All right, so listen, y'all. I would love to spend the next several years of my life going around the country doing like workshops on this. 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, we can really get into it. And in those workshops, we could do some storytelling about what works and what's not. Stephanie decided that we did not need to go till midnight. I don't know what she's thinking. So we're going to have to be a little more abbreviated. So while I would love to hear the stories, and that's why I'm inviting you, I hope y'all wrote down your email and want me to kind of get back to you. In this little moment we have here, I want to focus on the lessons, not necessarily the stories, the lessons that you gleaned from the times that it worked and the time that it didn't work. Who wants to offer forward? Either one of those. Again, as much as I want to hear the stories, just for sake of time, we probably should just focus on the lessons.
In my experience, I have not successfully had a conversion experience with someone who doesn't trust that I love them and care about them.
Whoa.
I've had good conversations, but I've not had if they don't trust that I care about them, the threat level goes up.
Got you.
And if I have it, then it can happen. Often it takes a couple of years of conversation in practice.
Right.
Like intentional practice over like 3 or 4 years.
Yep, got it. And it might very well be that if we're going to take on this work as a group, for skeptics, we need to focus on people in our circles of love. That might be, right? That's what your experience suggests that that's true. Got you. Okay. Any other people want to offer? From that very valuable table in the back.
So one place I'm thinking about is a leadership symposium that I went to where this was part of the program, and it was very much not in the bubble. This was a really mixed group of conservatives and liberals, for example. And some of the things that worked was to not stress the interpersonal part, which was where people who were deniers were really getting kind of turned off, but instead to stress it from a more structural piece rather than...
Oh, that was more effective.
That was more effective.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Got you. Thank you for that.
Most of my difficult discussions are with my family, and one thing that has been a little bit helpful in my family is for my siblings and I to sort of create new norms about like media consumption, for example. And one moment in particular was last summer. I was visiting them and watched the video of one of the police shootings of a black man, and my mother came home and found me crying, and it hadn't even occurred to her to watch those videos before like having an opinion about what had happened and who was right and wrong, and she ended up watching it, which she wouldn't have done had I not done it. And similarly with the nature, like what media we consume, what sources we consider legitimate news in my house, and the way we talk about it is slowly having an effect.
So that it reached her, it touched her, right?
It did. Well, I think her seeing me have a very genuine emotional reaction, and not even talking about race directly, but just like feeling that, and her seeing that was like, oh.
Right. Yeah. This is not just the sort of liberal program you're on. You actually have an authentic feeling of empathy and deep sadness for a human being that was murdered or severely injured. Mm-hmm.
So something I see often online, but in person as well, that tends to be ineffective is the way that we use the language to convey our concerns. So I often see people, jumping into like, you're racist, you're sexist, or like unpack your privilege, you're privileged, and you are using these words that I don't think everyone has a basic understanding of. Like, you just tell someone to check their privilege, but what does that mean to someone who's never really learned about privilege before? So, assuming that we're all on the same page of understanding racism or like historical racism, which I don't think is the case in our country.
So just to be clear, so the lesson is be careful about using terms, jargon, etc., because people don't understand that, and that can be off-putting. Is that? Okay. Did you have your hand up? Anybody else want to add?
I said, don't appeal to a need that your audience simply doesn't feel. I've had discussions with a number of people really close to me where I'm kind of trying to tweak their understanding of what it really takes to bring about justice. And sometimes I don't even fully buy into a rule myself, but I'll kind of tell them, well, this is kind of what people are doing now. And they'll usually call my bluff. I'll say, if you want to get along, if you want to not get in trouble, and like my mom will say, well, I'll not get in trouble by not hanging out with the ideologues you hang out with. So it's like, what does my audience really need, and how can I bring that need?
what Grace said because like with my family and like friends who I grew up with, I grew up in like a poor family in a low-income community, so the word privilege, like broke white folks, it's like really hard for them to like, that word just really makes you shut down. So I try to avoid, like when I want to get people to understand white privilege, I try to avoid using the word privilege.
What do you use instead?
I just try to like describe the situations and the scenarios and just not even use the kind of buzzword. And that typically, it takes time, but but I also was going to say that something that works for me is like instead of being like, oh, well, you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't say this, or framing it as like, oh, well, I used to think this, like placing the blame on myself in a way instead of like blaming them, like making them feel like totally uncomfortable.
Were you reading my mind about what I'm about to present? That's awesome.
So that's something that works for me.
That's awesome. So I want to point out, first of all, the idea that you don't use that word privilege. I tend not to use that either. I tend to call it, it's a little clumsy, like unearned racial advantage, because the privilege thing trips people out. So one of the things that I just want to, that's going to be obvious is that there are going to be people in the racial justice movement who would say something's wrong with you for not using that term, right? So part of what I think is the next wave of this kind of racial equity work is more discerning and honest conversations about what happens if you adjust your tactics and how do people feel about that. There's going to be, just to be clear, there's going to be a whole bunch of people who don't like what I'm about to tell y'all as a strategy for reaching people. And it includes those two things you just said. We've got a couple more, and then I want to make sure I deliver some content to y'all.
I think this is related to a lot of what I'm hearing, and what I've learned is that people learn more from love and empathy than they do from shame. They shut down. There's real shame, and they don't want to have anything else to do with it, and they don't want to associate with the conversation or the person who's having it anymore at all.
Wow, that was direct. Why don't you get the mic to her?
Yeah, I'm kind of doubling down on that, Sarah. It's the same kind of thing, having my mom sort of look at the experience that I'm talking about, not just through my eyes, but through my son's eyes or my husband's eyes, who are both of color, and understanding, because those are people she loves, right? Understanding that when Trayvon Martin was killed, he looked like my stepsons, and it felt, and she felt that. So it's really appealing, having those conversations and persistence. I wrote down persistence. Continue that because I'm loved. Like it doesn't happen if I don't love her. I'm so committed to having a relationship with my mom, and I want her to get
So it goes back to what he said, right?
100%, and the same thing, not shaming.
Got you. So before we move on to my content, I know you said earlier you inspired us, and we gave you a round of applause for some transformative situation. Could you just say the lessons, you say a little bit more about that, and especially the lessons from that?
Well, I used everything I had. Whenever they had an assumption about who I was able to counteract it. So over time, they started to actually think I was worth listening to. So that was the first thing, was establishing a rapport where they decided maybe I had an opinion worth hearing.
And you establish that rapport by
paying attention to what they were spewing, and counter responding to each thing and saying, well, actually, no, that's not true about me. They were caught up in their language of libertards and snowflakes, and you're this and you're that, and you shouldn't be in this country. You're and I have to.
But they're telling you shouldn't be in this country?
I shouldn't be in this country. Libertards should all.
You're a white woman. You need to be here. Everybody. I thought you were accepted by everybody. Not these people.
Not anymore.
Right.
Not anymore. It's changed.
Wow.
So.
Good for you for hanging in. Good for you for hanging in there with that.
I used my white privilege of having, ancestors who raped and pillaged this country to be here. So, oh, well, now I'm worth listening to. And I kept, you know, I heard empathy, I had to leave the room, but I heard empathy used a lot, and I listened to what their grievance was, and I finally realized that one of these guys was an ex-military, he'd been over fighting a lot, and he was just in so much pain, and I started talking, I think you have PTSD, and who are you seeing for that? And it must be really hard to come back and feel like, you know, you don't have what you want. And so a lot of that is what kind of shifted it. And I just kept saying, I think you're getting wrong information. And that's how Howard Zinn's book came into the conversation. That, you know, this isn't out of nowhere, because they were convinced that Muslims hate us just because of our religion. I'm like, no, there's a history. America's been doing things all over the world for a very long time, and this is not just all of a sudden out of nowhere.
So what are the signs? So I appreciate you saying. What are the, before I get back to the next thing, what are the signs in which you cause that shit? I mean, I'm not asking skeptically. I'm just saying, how do you know you reached at least one of these people?
Because she got much softer, and she was responding to me with curiosity. It went from defensiveness and you're wrong to, oh, I didn't know that. Tell me more.
And she read the book.
I don't know if she read the book.
Well, she bought them. She said.
We lost contact after that.
I got you.
But, yeah.
All right.
I just.
Just
a comment on that. You mentioned curiosity. She showed curiosity, and I think I was just heard something about from a workshop about how you asking questions and keeping an open mind. Ask with curiosity. So if you ask somebody else and show curiosity towards them, which obviously you did, that then opens the door for them to reciprocate.
These last comments, it is hard for me to know whether or not the way these comments line up with what I'm about to tell y'all shows that I'm like really smart or really what I've done is very basic, because it resonates so much with what y'all have been talking about. Okay, so this next sheet is called the reflection connection method. I'm going to briefly review it, and if we have time, we're going to try to have you actually do a piece of that work. Here's the basic strategy. My belief is that if there are many opportunities to educate skeptics. In fact, I personally think that every white ally needs to have the people on their list for this year that they're working on, and that they consciously are working on them. They're talking about how they're working, how that work is going with other white allies, and that is a goal for the year. Now, that's fine. My project is going to give like a curriculum, a set of an order of ideas that I think are most effective. But that's one way of doing that. Another way of doing that is to use messed up comments as a learning opportunity, either in the moment or going forward. It's look at those comments as open doors, an on-ramp to a set of conversations, as you said. It's not a one conversational question, to a set of conversations that are designed to expand the person's thinking. Now, so as some of y'all took the assessment tool, which was based around those comments, right? Who in here took the assessment tool last night? Okay, so you saw, so basically I had several comments and I asked people to look at what is their emotional reaction, how much are they triggered by the comments, what's the tendency to engage, and what's their baseline level of understanding of that thinking. I think that those kind of comments are the on-ramp to good exchanges if we know how to have that. Here's what I'm suggesting in the reflection connection method. The first thing you got to do is work on your own listening skills. You need to, separate from racial issues itself, you need to, and maybe it includes that, you need to work on your own capacity to listen to ideas that you don't like and not be triggered by it. So from a racial standpoint, you want to look at what triggers you and why is it? Is it because your mama talked like that? Is it because you feel implicated as a white person? Is it because it's just too overwhelming and depressing to think, look at the amount of work I got to do with this fool? It doesn't, you need to look at what comments trigger you and why they trigger you so you can stay in listening mode. That's pre-work before you have any kind of conversation. But that's not the only level of pre-work. In this method, I'm suggesting that for specific issues that you hear a lot, and there are several of them that we all hear, you need to prepare to listen to that, to prepare to take people on that journey. And that preparation means looking at experiences that you have that are relevant to that you might bring up when it's time to engage a skeptic around those issues. Now, I think that there's two types of experiences you want to tap into, you want to tap in your own experience on. One are experiences that validate some piece of the statement. So if the statement is, you know, there's all this stuff about police brutality, but basically, if you just act right, the cops will treat you fine. Race doesn't matter. Is there any truth, is there anything you can agree with that is embedded in that statement? Who got one? What?
I agree that when I interact with the police, they treat me with respect, and they probably have you.
Okay, that's a good one. You got one?
I'll just say, I think that's true sometimes for some people.
How about, got it, those are all good. How about all cops are not bad? That's embedded in that. How about what you do in an encounter has some impact on what the cop does? Right? That is actually true, right? So this method suggests that you look at the different things you're likely to hear and do some prelim reflection on, do I have some experiences that can validate a piece of that? Write those down, practice telling it, practice the 45-second version and the 3-minute version, right? And do I have any experiences that tend to expand the view? Have those stories in your mind even before you try to engage the conversation. Okay, now that you've had those, now if somebody says something like that, you can either in the moment or follow up, tell me more about that. You seem to believe this. Tell me some experience that makes you think that. You're going past perspective to experience. Why do you think that? Right? It's validating, it's validating them. It's saying you're not a complete idiot, right? Tell me about your experience that produced your views like that. Then you respond with some experience that tends to validate that, some piece of it, like I just was talking about. You know, I agree with you. All cops are not bad. Let me tell you about what happened to me. Boom, 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 boom. So you're meeting the person with some piece of what they said. Now, some of the reason you're doing that is, as you said, a whole bunch of people, by the way, this is not only for conservative people, but a lot of this is conservative liberal split, but not all of it. A lot of conservatives are, they're in this kind of drama in their minds where liberals are representing, like they're enabling the downfall of the nation largely through these people of color who are lazy, less intelligent, and problematic all sorts of ways. And that liberals and liberalism, and their attempt to convert me are just dragging that all down. Part of what you're doing by meeting them with the experience is to say, I'm not working out that drama. I'm a person like you who believes in, to some extent, order, orderliness, rules have a place, right? You're meeting them on some level with some part of their value system before you try to expand their view, right? Okay, you probe their experiences, you offer your own. If they're conceptual thinkers, you say, could it be possible that this is true and something else is true? Could it be possible that there are good cops out there and maybe most cops are good, and there are some that are bad, and that those people, communities of color experience that? Could those both be true? Part of what you're trying to do is to expand their thinking. Now, some people that's not going to work to have a conceptual question. Some people will work, some people won't work. That's more of an optional one. But whether you have the question or not, after you have a beat, as they call it in theater, a beat where we just aligned. We're looking eye to eye. You know that's true. But you notice but there's something else too that I want to offer forward to this conversation. You've already established that we're using experiences as a mechanism of finding truth. They offered one, you offered one or two that validate them. Let me tell you about some other experiences that I know about or have had. Then you try to expand their vision of the situation by offering some experience, not a perspective, an experience that suggests a broader set of things are true. After that, then you might break out some data. After that. Now, of course, in this model, you've done some preparation for this conversation. You have gone to, eventually, my website that has like the data about police brutality, the data about economic disparity, the data about privilege, right? And perhaps you are in a learning community, or perhaps that site, that's the goal, is people are offering forward. I use this, it really worked. You know how people rate restaurants or rate things? What my aspiration is to have the website give feedback on what works and what tends to not work. Yelp reviews on social justice arguments, right? Yeah. So again, there's a sequence here. Yes.
As you're talking, I'm just thinking about the different groups of people that I interact with and how they're at different places with what they can hear or what they're even aware of, and how part of it is figuring out what's their next step towards expansion, because you can't just give them all the same thing. Like if I'm talking to my Nebraska in-laws who don't even know any black people, you know, versus talking to people at this church who think of themselves as really liberal, but really aren't.
Right.
It's a very different conversation, and if I go in with the wrong approach, it's going to completely fall apart.
Right. So part of the refinement, the learning community is people figuring out how do you adapt strategies to people? What are the main factors in who they are and how you raise issues? When you raise the data? What's the degree to which certain types of people need not your story, but they need for you to have a secondhand story from a person of color? Some people it's going to be more effective, some people it's going to be less effective, right? So that we have to figure out that, and that's not easy to do. But my aspiration for this project is to create a platform where we can collectively start figuring that out.
I think most of the conversations we're talking about are conversations with, to use a very simplistic term, diet racists or racism skeptics. People are basically good people who don't want to think of themselves as racist. Do we have any data on the people we're talking about talking to real live Archie Bunkers? And do we have data on real live Archie Bunkers trying to talk to Nazis? Like, we know there's so many gradations. Do we know how they talk to each other when they're trying to call each other in?
I think the basic answer is no. I think that one of the things that I have advocated for in the newspaper where I live is conservatives is trying to create an anti-racist conservatism. Part of the whole problem I think that many people who do this work are in is that we don't believe that conservatives can be anti-racist. We associate conservatism with racism. So that was started by Richard Nixon, the Southern strategy. There's a history of why we do that. Yeah. But part of what goes on is that when we're having these conversations about racism, the conservatives feel like you're not just trying to make me non-racist, you're trying to change my whole worldview. So what we have to do is we have to let that go. We have to, even if we haven't seen the anti-racist conservatism, we have to assume it is possible. I'm not trying to get you to not be conservative. I'm just trying to get you to get out of denial about racism. You can be conservative, but we have to make that shift, and we have to approach the conversation with that respect, and I don't think we're doing that. We're trying to change their entire worldview, and they know that, and that's why they're blocking us on Facebook, and we're not walking out of stop talking, we walk into the room, and all these things like that.
So Trump really gave us an opportunity to do that we didn't have before. I mean, really, I'm just thinking about conversations with my stepbrothers in Kentucky who are economic conservatives, fiscal conservatives, and I can ask them, like, so how does the racist piece of Trump, how I can ask those questions, and they are able to talk about that separately. Like, that's a kind of an unprecedented opportunity.
I don't know if I shared it with you, Paige. I wrote an article about the need for media, Diane Rehm, Joshua Johnson, those kind of people, to have conversations among conservative pundits about how much racism is too much? How much of this alt-right is too far before we have to distance ourselves from it? It was refreshing to see Paul Ryan distance himself from the whole Judge Curiel comments as that's a textbook definition of racism. We need more conversations like that, but it's going to be difficult, you know, when liberals just have the mindset that every conservative is a racist, and they have many problematic views, right? But when we don't encourage that kind of discernment among them and that discussion among them, then they cast us all aside as people to be ignored.
I have a question with that. So I had this conversation with my 17-year-old nephew, and he said, so you say my friends are all racist or their parents are all racists because they voted for Trump. I said, no, but until I speak to them, I won't know. And I basically was thinking, of course they are. And so for me, I think that there weren't enough deal breakers. Racism and sexism were not deal breakers enough for them. And why is that? So in my view, in my worldview, absolutely they're racist. I'm really struggling with this since this whole thing went down, and I'm not there. I can't get there.
But just create an opportunity to ask those questions and create that conversation. I mean, these are my stepbrothers.
Yeah,
You know, this is good.
right.
More conversations will happen. Right? They're
So-
at home thinking about it.
So my perspective on that would be, I think somebody said, all people voted for Trump are not racist, but all the racists voted for Trump, right? But which I think is kind of clever, but part of what we have to wrestle with is that there are people who saw Trump as problematically racist, but not disqualifyingly so. So before we get mad at them, the reason I created this project is because I thought that a whole bunch of the sort of white allies extended are not calling that question. They're not confronting people like Paige apparently was doing with, okay, let's not make him the worst racist in the world. He's not David Duke. He tends to make racially problematic statements. How bad does it have to be before you don't vote for him? Just to have that conversation without deciding on the front end, you're wrong if you don't draw that line like I do it. So when people feel like if they feel you are drawing, your perspective is you got to draw the line, they got to draw a line like you do, then they're not trying to have a conversation with you.
Right, absolutely.
Did you have your hand up? So we are close to the time, y'all. So here's what I want to hand out with my handsome assistant. So I want to give you all a takeaway. We didn't get to it. It's reflection questions prepared to discuss unconscious bias. So basically, this is part of my toolkit. There's a series of questions. Some of them are reflection questions to help you connect with a skeptic, and the other are reflection questions to help you expand the worldview. So that's a take home. You can do it at home. So I would invite you to do that. Did we get the one on privilege?
It's on the front.
Okay. So I got two things for y'all. So there's another one about racial advantage, i.e. white privilege. So this is just a reflection question. This is part of my upcoming workbook. If somebody else can help pass these out too. So there's also an evaluation form. So I'm hoping that y'all can fill out the evaluation form. It has 5 questions. There's room for comments. We love comments. I mean, I could have done all this on the keypads, but part of the reason for written forms is that you can have comments on it. So if we could take a second to do that, that would be fantastic. Okay, so we're wrapping up. Appreciate you doing evaluation forms and making comments if you can. This is a new innovative project. Y'all are the debut crowd. I did a focus group in Detroit last week, and I'm gonna do a focus group in Detroit, in San Francisco, in the Oakland coming up. But this is the first forum like this, so I really appreciate y'all taking the time.
Thank you for your work.
All right. Well, thank you for that. So I have a couple of final keypad questions. So grab your keypad.
So
Someone stole it? All right. Level of valueless workshop. This is always a scary question. It's anonymous. You can be as honest as you dare.
Unless we all answer the same way.
All right, we're going to go forward. All right, we'll take that. Yay. This next question is for Brian, and we're going to use it the next couple of days. How much did the clickers add to this experience? Distraction, none, very little, some, good amount, a lot. Okay, so about 70% thought they added either a good amount or a lot. So that'll be useful on Friday when we talk about civic engagement. All right, so thank y'all so much. If any of y'all who felt this was really valuable are willing to give a 3-minute on-camera testimonial, that'll help us and the project here, help me and the project here, because this kind of work, as we have said, as I've said, this approach to doing this kind of work is different, right? It's different than what you hear from most people who do race work. So I know that there's going to be pushback. So to the extent to which you found it valuable and are willing to take 3 minutes to go through 4 questions that the gentleman will ask you and to put on camera, that would be great. And I really appreciate people being willing to fill out those forms. And if you didn't put your name on the form with the stories, but still would like to be in touch with me, just give me your card or some piece of paper with your email on it. That would be fantastic. I want to thank y'all so much for your time and for your work as white allies. Y'all are so important and need to be celebrated and lifted up. Thank y'all.
Thank you.